fuzzy is just trying to get it for you to see them. Let's take a step back to ecology and think about the ecological concepts that are out there. So of course, I did the prayer because that'll be the next habitat ecosystem you're going to study. So of course, the biosphere, we're in Mother Earth. There's no other place we can go to that we know can sustain outside of this planet. The ecosystem, the community of living and non-living things. So it has to be a mixture of both components. Of course, the community is a population that live together in defined areas. So the community of trees around the river bottom, the community of trees around the Greer Island. And then of course, population means the more specific species. So let's see, all the water scorpions you found at your last one. That's a population. Anybody get bit? Anybody submerge underwater?
Oh, not underwater.
Oh man. Oh man. If you went seining, how far did you go? I know there's lotuses everywhere.
I went
Anybody?
No.
Yeah. Anybody lose a shoe?
Yes.
I will find it next year. I'll give you your directions. I'll send it to you. But yeah, the community of all the organisms there and all the unknowns that are there. Everybody would go seining, sorry, sidetrack. They think of the alligators as the possible predator coming out for us, which is a concept that I understand because it's potential, it's a big predator, but what I get biting me are the diving beetles, the toe biting beetles, and those are like, ooh. And of course, then populations and organism or the species, and then so on, it goes into all the way to the model. So that's the big concept of what we have on this planet. And okay, this is gonna. Another way to think about it is organism, populations, a group of species, communities, group of populations of different species, and ecosystems, community of animals and non-living and living, and the biosphere, everything. So just to clear out what is biotic and abiotic, because that's a question that gets tested on, and they're like, oh, let me hold on, let me tell you. So biotic means living things, so that means bacteria, fungi, plants, animals, protists, and then abiotic would be, of course, which is air, salinity, soil, temperature, light, water, anything that it's independent from, it's independent, something inorganic. So we're going to touch base on all those, not really, a couple of those in the ecology, but we definitely want to know more about the biotic of living creatures. So complex diagram of this is, of course, ecosystem, biotic and abiotic. And then you have the abiotic factors, which means rain, the light, the wind, the temperature, and then acidic, soil, pH, minerals, topography, biotic, producers, consumers, composers, and so on and so on. I think when we look at an ecosystem, the first thing that comes to mind is only the living things. And we sometimes forget about the non-living things that play a big factor of how those living things move around or depend and grow, particularly plants. So as we move on to the forest in our community of trees, a lot of climatic factors play a major role of how we get to grow. And again, it comes to mind when a person brings and says, I want a red oak in my backyard. And when you look at all the abiotic factors, which tell them that's not the best place for a red oak, sometimes we forget that those play a major role in the growth of the plant. Does anybody have a green thumb? Or will brag about having a green thumb?
I've got two.
Native or non-native plants?
Both.
Both? Okay. Indoor or outdoor?
Both.
Oh, yeah.
It's the two.
Oh,
One for each.
Orchids or not orchids?
No.
Oh,
No.
not orchids. I'm trying. Okay, so another factor, let's take a climate. This is a good representation about what types of ecosystems we have, of certain community of plants. So of course, you can see at the bottom, it's gauged by average temperature on the sides and annual precipitation. That's work. There you go. So of course, warmer, higher precipitation, you have the tropical rainforest. As you move down, you have your subtropical desert. Then as you move this way, you have the temperate grasslands, the wooded shrublands, temperate system forest. That's where we are. Temperate rainforest, the taiga, and the trend. So that's a one way of looking at it. This is a fun way. I'm a visual learner, so hopefully you get to see this. You can see, of course, the polar region with less vegetation. As you move down to the wet and hot, you have the rainforest, which is a place that hopefully all of us get to see in a lifetime. And then, of course, the citrus forest, a little bit warmer with a little bit more wet period. And then, of course, the coniferous forest as we move up. And also forgot to mention, that's also depending on topography. That is a factor that has to be played into the growth of some of the plants here. Did you know that North America has how many? 15 types of biomes here. It depends what map you're watching, because there's the different levels of detail to the biomes, but the general one is 15. And of course, we fall into the Great Plains biome. But how many ecoregions does Texas have? Anybody take a wild guess with the book?
13.
Some people say 13, some people say 10. I have it. I don't know which one is correct, but there's 10 in this map. We are in the cross timbers and prairies, and of course, they're for the cross timbers master naturalists. Further east, we have the blackline prairies, and then of course, you can see Texas is so huge that you have all the diversities. If you ever get time to travel from one area to another, you get to cross most of them, from east to west or west to east. That's pretty impressive.
Fun fact, Arlington has both the cross timbers and prairies and the black coast prairies. It's like,
You're in the middle, right?
yes.
The middle. Yeah. And I didn't think there's a major factor, but for me, when I started looking at that lemon bee balm, y'all know the lemon bee balm. There's the spotted lemon bee balm on the further east, but we don't have the spotted. I mean, we do start getting integration spotted bee balm, but which I'm like, why? We're just a couple of miles away, but it's about what precipitation, soil, all different abiotic factors. So that's a cool fact. Okay, guys, so I'm going to stay here because I was hoping to use this, but of course, this is in your book if you can't see it, but I was just picking out some of the ecoregions, of course, where we have the types of woods. Of course, piney woods come to mind when you think of forest. East, lush, tall, coniferous, more rainfall, 36 to 50 inches average. It has pine, oak, and other hardwood forest in there. And then, of course, you go to the Edwards Plateau and you have short grass and grassland, but you have junipers and oak, juniper forest and mesquite. And then, of course, you go down to the border area, the thorny brush, mesquite, acacia, prickly pear, and some grasslands area. And where my favorite feline lives, hopefully he's doing well, the ocelot is there. Of course, Transfecus, if you go to the area of El Paso, there is trees in that area. It's pretty amazing how they adapt. It's mostly desert shrubland, succulents, but you get some oak juniper surviving in that, and pinyon woodlands. And of course, us cross timbers, 28 to 40 inches average rainfall with oak, hickory, and tall grass prairies. So, another overwhelming picture of how much trees in the forest ecosystem plays is that forest ecosystems affect from increased soil of humus to the soil protection, so there's no erosion, of course, to photosynthesis, increase in biomass, to windbreaks, to removing pollution, to climate regulation. So many things come to mind when you think of a forest. And forest, I'm not saying that ecosystem is better than a wetland or to a prairie, but what it plays in an area is pretty valuable. So how do we get to see this? So how do we get to figure out all these layers? It's actually layers and layers. So when we start walking in the forest, I think the most obvious thing is the species or the trees. They're tall and they're in front of us, and there's so many of them. But then you look at the understory plants trying to get some of the sunlight trying to grow. And then of course you go to the forest floor because it's closer to, I would say my eye level, so we can see that. And then the soil, if you really look at underneath the leaf litter, there's so much more that we forget to look at the forest floor. But that's for a typical hiker. You're a master naturalist, right? You're moving it up. You're thinking beyond this basic what you see, correct? So now you're looking at the seasonality of when the leaves, if they lose their leaves. And then you know that of course affects how the nutrients are absorbed. And from there on, of course, how the roots are taking the water and how the soil with all the organic matter is helping sustain some of the water and the nutrients leaching into the soil. There's a complex community that relates that is in the forest. Question, just a general question. Who removes all the leaf litter and puts it out to trash? Some people are like, giving me that look. You understand why, right? So, throwing my husband under the bus, he's not here. So when I marry him, and I have a pecan tree and an American elm in my backyard, huge trees, in my opinion. He thought he had to remove every leaf that they dropped. And of course, being nice and understanding, we went to Home Depot and got bags of bags to put out. Unbeknownst to me, as I later on, of course, knowing this, I'm removing those nutrient cycle that the trees are having to help themselves. So I'm actually not helping my tree. I'm spending money, not helping my retention of wider community. And well, my husband did it. But yeah, so FYI. And now we have a marriage is equal, right? He chips it. Just gets the decomposition going faster and faster. Is everybody good, or am I feeling the warmth of the light? Okay, let me see if this works. There we go. If we get too cold, we'll move on. Okay, so yes, so master naturalists start thinking that there's more than what we see. And then if we take up the bigger picture, you get to see the rain, when we get rain, how the trees absorb it, and then we get the anthropomorphic features of people taking from the tree, eating, enjoying, and then of course the nutrients going down deeper and moving along to other ecosystems. So again, I think what I'm trying to relate is that when you think of a forest, there's so much complex, and it depends on how much you want to look into it. You're very simple tree roots, or you can think about how everything falls in place together. And the balance, that's what nature is. It's trying to maintain the balance. Sometimes it works, sometimes we have a drought and things get a little bit skewed, but nature is amazing. And in the forest, you get to see it. So any geologists along here, so you might help me out, because geology was not my forte in college, but I've learned to enjoy looking at rocks. And in the back of the building, there is fossils, and tells you a little bit of what's happening here or what happened a long time ago. So we have, this is geologic map, which states the types of bedrock underneath or soil components underneath. And of course, Precambrian means 600 million years ago. That's the most ancient type of rock or deposition you can find. Of course, right in the middle, right here. We here in our area, this is Tarrant County, Dallas County. So we are in the between two Cretaceous, Comanche and Gulf shelf. So what does that tell? What does that mean, Laura? Okay, there's several geological terms. Well, what that means is that what we find underneath our feet can tell us what kind of soil we'll have. So, just for our understanding, as we move away from Dallas, we are in the Cretaceous, but then we go into what is older sediment, older rock, older bedrock. As we move towards Dallas, we have younger. And most of the younger rock, it is found right here. So again, if you ever get to travel to this area, go without with a geologist to find some of the coolest, oldest rocks.
What's the area?
I'm not sure. And what,
Where would that be?
anybody get it?
Enchanted rock.
Maybe it's at that's where it's from. I'm not very good with yeah, no, it's the Colorado rock. I need to go back to Texas, Tarrant County. Yeah, I didn't do that because I only know the little shapes of my square.
The Lana uplift deep in the heart of Texas.
Deep in the heart of Texas. It is in a deep in the heart of Texas. But I find that very interesting because I would have thought, most of the younger, but if you knew that there was a sea right in the middle of most of the United States, that's why when we go in the back of the building and we still all the Cretaceous, all the limestone embedded with aquatic fossils, you can kind of understand a little bit of the history. And how does that relate to the soil? Well, from rocks comes soil. The breaking down of all of those rocks eventually form into a type of soil. But I think this is cool. This is my problem, living things. So, okay. So what's happened during the Cretaceous period? Cretaceous rock, first flowering plants, Rocky Mountains form, full stress faults and general uplifts at the end of the period. So like they always tell us, humans came at the last minute, at the last second of time. If you think of a clock, we came at 11:59. Pretty amazing. And there's so much geology out there that you can there's so many books to look into. But if you're ever looking to find a big fossil here, most of them are aquatic, most of them are Texagriphia, and then most of them are not turtles, urchins. That's another one that we have. Ammonite, which we have. So let's talk about soils. Soils are amazing. We forget that they hold so much life. Not every soil is equal, but what is the soil to a plant? It supplies the location and it holds the plant, the plants in place, the roots in place, supplies nutrients to complete the plant's cycle. Acts like a temporary reservoir, of course, when water supplied by rain. It stores oxygen in the pockets. If you are a good house plant horticulturist, you know that you have to sometimes try to mimic what naturally happens into this pot that you have your plant grow. Sometimes successful, sometimes not. And what does that influence? What plants can and cannot grow. So the soil can, again, like I mentioned, when some person wants to plant a tree, first look at your soil before you say, I'm going to spend a lot moving a tree over. How fast plants grow. If they don't have the nutrients, if you put them in a sandy soil, they're going to be starving for a while until they get adapted. Or how about biomass? How much can they grow with what they can obtain? And the stability against winds. So that's going to be play a big factor of how we see our trees around us. For example, I don't know if you notice when you go to the cross timbers habitat, it's very sandy, right? It's one of the cool endemic features is that when you're walking across timbers, it makes you feel like you can walk on like beach. What that factors is that sand doesn't hold that many nutrients. It kind of washes through faster because it's a bigger sediment. Versus that you go to the riparian habitat, very clayish, you got your, you walk on out of it and there's mud. It absorbs and holds more of the nutrients and there's more decomposition. We'll talk a little bit more in detail about that. So interesting facts, of course, living soils are plant roots, bacteria, fungi. I think before we used to think soil, there's nothing but just earthworms, but there's so much more. And before, people used to inoculate the soil before putting plants in, and now we're figuring out that the fungi and the bacteria have a major factor in how plants will grow. So,
Also for absorbing CO2.
and also for absorbing CO2. So there's so many factors that we used to think, let's start from scratch. Let's just clear out, nuke the area, and we will get things moving in. And knowing ecology, what moves in are usually not the things that you want or beneficial for the new living organism you plant. So yes.
Are there certain trees that can grow in a real sandy soil, like I'd like to learn about that
Okay.
later on.
We, after our break, we will definitely get more into community trees, which I have a couple scattered on the wall that you will help me out. So again, I'm going through the basics just a little bit, just like, oh my God. Because again, when I started Master Naturalist in 2000, I was like, I didn't know all this, especially out of college, you're thinking, well, I thought, and forgive me, I thought, oh, I already did this, studied that. But when you see it playing all together, you're like, oh, there's more. So okay, soil structure, really important. We will learn about sand, silt, and clay in a few minutes. Soil biology, the biotic, the bacteria and fungi that we are learning more about every day. And organic matter, fresh, decomposing, stabilized, at what stage of decomposition we find the matter. And then of course the nutrients, the macronutrients, the most important ones, the micro, the secondary, the primary. All this comes into play into the soil. So when we think of vegetation, either prairie, grasslands, or wetlands, all these factors help this ecosystem evolve. And what is the difference? Tie back to what we have around us. The EPA put this out that a forest soil, and I'm assuming this is like non-disturbed forest soil, that it's inorganic, 2 to 5% organic, 25% water, and the pockets of the particles, there's air. Versus urban, there's a lot more inorganic, less air because we tend to compact or pile on things and then compact. And then we either water or not water, and there's little organic because we rake them. We want a clean, pristine forest with no leaf litter where things can hide. Yes. So pretty impressive to consider how urban forest and rural and urban forest are different. So here's a little bit of information about particles, which is important to get an idea what can grow in your area. So sand is the largest, and then you have silt, more fine, but clay is really, really small. So how does that play into the growth and food? So you can see clay holds nutrients because the water doesn't leach it out as fast, but doesn't move water that much. So if you have your house on clay, it can be questionable how it's going to hold with pure beam. Holds air? No, because it's so compact. So consider there's plants for every type of soil out there. Silt, medium, and holds nutrients. It's like medium at everything. Medium is good to hold water. The composition of the color is usually brown. Sand, of course, poor is more porous. Moves water very well. Drains soil very well. Because it drains so well, it doesn't hold any water, and it holds air because there are big particles there. And then, of course, what we hope to have is a little bit of both, of low, medium to good. Good holds water, good at holding air. But don't think that every tree will prefer one. There's different species for every type of texture, soil texture. Yes.
So I know sandy loamy soil is like fantastic, but what is loam?
It's a mixture. It's a mixture of different, and we're about to get there when we do a little graph. So here's how it plays with what grows. So again, stepping back and look at the big picture right now. If you have just clay, it's high nutrients because it doesn't leach out as much. This is a very cool thing that wet and cool in the winter and baked dry in the summer. That will affect the roots. So that's why, or prairie stays a prairie. And a factor that it's very clayish and it just warms up and cooks everything there. So trees to get established really have to create a good, unique microclimate. Having to dig and cultivate, yeah, if you try to put a shovel right now into the prairie right there, try. Easily damaged when dug because you're trying to get right through it. Of course, drain slowly after rain. This is a factor for hikers, like when they call me and say, is it ready? Is it good? Is it ready to go on the trail? I always say, do not go on the prairie trail because you'll be carrying clay underneath your feet. And of course, warms up slowly as summer approaches, leading to the late plant growth and workability. So that's a factor if you only have clay. Silt, usually down by the riparian habitat by the river bottom forest. Here, fertile soil, moisture retentive, and easily compacted, warm up more quickly in the spring than clay soils. And of course, I think this is going to be covered a little bit. Can we move that so I can see?
Hit the minimize.
There you go. There, minimize. Okay. There you go. So sand. Drains quickly after the rain, warms up more quickly. Spring, then in clay soils, of course, dries out quickly because there are low plant nutrients, and of course, it tends to be acidic. Everything gets leached out. So, knowing what your plants want, you can provide a little bit of their basic needs. So if you're studying soils, you're probably familiar with this pyramid. This is a soil texture pyramid, and there's a fun little thing you can do at home to figure out what you have. You can also get someone to do it for you, but this is simple. We high schoolers do it in class sometimes. They get a mason jar, and you get soil, and you shake it, mix it all together. I've done it here with for summer camp kids. All take the same soil, so it doesn't take but you shake it out, and then you can see after 24 hours how it's settled. When you get the percentages of what you have, for example, this is more, you will hopefully have a little bit of everything, but depending on the percentage, will tell you what you have. Then you can integrate it in here. So for example, on this one, you see this mason jar? So 10% clay, you will draw a line on the 10% clay. And then you will draw a line at the 30% silt. And then you will draw a line at 60% sand. So what does that give?
Sandy loam.
Sandy loam. So that kind of gives you an idea how this will behave. It's a mixture of everything. And it can easily be done in your backyard. We're almost to a break. So how does this affect over time? How does soil affects the growth of the plants or forest over time? So again, in mature soils where it's mostly parent rock or bedrock, you will have really no soil above, and over time, as the composition, the weathering of the rock and more organic matter coming into it, you will get a younger layer of soil. And then of course, at a mature forest, you will have a very good dense composition of organic matter. At the Nature Center, the best mature forest that we have is the cross timbers. In 1980, there was a doctor, I do not remember his name. He did dendrochronology. He drilled and took out little samples of the tree. And by then he was estimating, so counting the rings, he counted some of them to be close to 300 years old. That was in 1980. So given the math, they're a little bit over that. When was the 1776 was the Declaration of Independence signed, right? How long ago was that? Someone does the math. Was that over 300 years old? So the trees are older than that, which is impressive because cross timbers, there's not a lot of first growth trees around the area. This is kind of very unique to look at, the section of soil. Now, if you think over time, when someone tells you, oh, this is subsoil, elevation soil, top soil, Organic matter is the one that falls on the top. That's what we see most of the time. Of course, if you bring a shovel and dig under, you will see the minerals and the humus, the debris breaking apart of the topsoil. And then of course, the alleviation layer is when the area where all things are get leached down further down. And the subsoil is all the minerals. It's a different color of the soil because it gets stays there. And then of course the C is the parent rock that's weathered over a little bit more than the bedrock underneath that. That will play a factor how the roots are able to establish in an area, especially if it's first moving into an established area. So thinking about forests over the world, you know, you would think the organic matter will be all at the rainforest, but because there's no seasonality, it's always growing and there's moisture there, everything gets leached down there. We have the temperate deciduous forest. So we have a seasonal and we have leaf litter falling annually. And therefore there is more of a breakdown, slow breakdown, and there's not as much rain as in the rainforest. So we get to see the layers a little bit better and there's more organic matter. And then of course the coniferous a little bit because of the leaf needles, acid litter and humus, lightly color acidic, and you can notice the different layers. So climate plays a factor, but it's also how things are weathered down. pH. Did you know vultures have almost a pH of 0? Everybody love vulture. We just celebrated vulture. Yeah, yeah, the first Saturday of each month of the year of September. So everybody knows the 2 species of vulture that we have here. Everybody want to tell us? Yeah, and out of both of them, of course, the turkey vulture is the one that has that teeter-totter as he flies. But let's go back to pH. So here's a little pH. How does that play into the soil? Well, some nutrients do not get picked up as well in certain types of pH. That plays a factor at how the plants absorb it. So that's also a question. When you look at a habitat, an ecosystem, you think about the pH of the soil. How can you tell? Well, it depends on what kind of texture it has. And therefore you can kind of know, at certain requirements, it could be really detrimental to the plant or where the plant cannot absorb certain elements. So primary phosphorus is a good thing to have in some of our plants, but if the soil is alkaline, which in the back of us, because we have a lot of limestone, it tends to be a little bit more alkaline than other areas. Okay, so this map, please forgive this average rainfall was taken before a drought. So the numbers might be different, but of course, usually 32 average around our area, but it states here 35 to 40 inches. That's pretty good, a good year. In 2003, the boardwalk dried out here. I found a picture. If you haven't been to the boardwalk, I have a picture of me standing in the boardwalk with vultures just pecking out at the leftover fish. And now, before COVID, we had a good flood. That I also have a picture of a coworker who was paddling towards the boardwalk on the road. And of course, this year we're almost so much. Oh my gosh. But I didn't know this, but we are about to get technically average precipitation. October and May tends to be the most rainiest time of the year in our area, and that was from 2022. So that's pretty good. Get your raincoats on because there's going to be rain in the forecast. Hopefully, we need it. We're still deprived from water. Our lakes are looking sometimes very, very low. Okay, after this, we'll take a break just to stretch your legs. Important about the cycle. I wanted to put a picture of the water cycle, but we probably already know condensation, evaporation, and all those factors. But I wanted to see how the water cycle moves into a forest. So we noticed for precipitation, it can be snow, it can be ice, it can be water. Of course, evapotranspiration is what the trees give up. It evaporates back up there. Evaporation is when it happens on the soil. And of course, as you can see in this bigger picture, everything flows down to the watershed. And we here, the Trinity River is for a major river that all our water kind of flows to. And then of course, if it doesn't infiltrate down, if it infiltrates down, it goes into our groundwater flow. So water moves all in a good cycle, but when it rains, next time you go out in the forest, think of this, and I probably you've done this because I've done it to my friends. You're walking after rain and they're back there talking and you shake the tree and hopefully they get wet because they weren't paying attention to me. But you can see precipitation. It can either just fall directly to the ground, which then of course it infiltrates down through all the layers and then goes drained down to come to groundwater, or it can be intercepted, and that's what happens. Therefore, it gets hold on to the leaves, and then or it can transpire, or it goes through fall, eventually drips down. Gravity helps the water droplets get down here. Or what I find interesting, the structure and function of plants is that the stem flow allows some of that through fall to go down to the taproot of the tree, which is cool, right? Especially if you're needing water to grow. And of course, evaporation. So pretty cool, the hydro. So next rain, I don't see when the rain is coming here, but walk with a friend and make sure you shake the little trees here and there, see what they think. And you can tell them it's through fall. And the last one is solar radiation. Who knew that not only do we put something to make sure that we don't get extra wrinkles too fast, but solar radiation plays to the growth factor of plants. So I don't know if you ever heard this. The albedo effect is the proportional incident light radiation that is reflected by a surface. And this is really cool because this comes to global warming, climate change. So of course, snow is reflected because it's the light color reflects the light. So it reflects 80 to 95%. Forest 10 to 20. Some of it's absorbed, but not everything reflected back. Asphalt, let's see what's that one. 5 to 10, it's black, so that absorbs more of the heat, so therefore the earth warms up. Grass, 20 to 30, so prairies, pretty good. The moon reflects some of it, the light, the water, the let's see, the houses. So this is what we talk about global warming happening and how it's affecting even our trees. So when there's low canopy cover, kind of like savanna, you have high albedo effect, so high reflection. Of course, if you have a dense forest like the cross timbers, you will have high canopy cover and low albedo, and that's means when we disrupt the ecosystem, we have consequences like for ecological loss. Also seasonality. Think about deciduous forest. So during the summer, we have a lot of foliage, so there's less albedo effect going on. And during the winter, there's more reflection because it's hitting and reflecting back. But here's global warming into the fact. So so as the earth warms and there's more CO2 because either we cut trees or put more molecules in the air, it traps the heat and therefore it's gonna melt the ice a little bit faster, and therefore the whole cycle just keeps repeating itself and itself again. So how does that affect the plants? Well, they're adapted to a certain pattern, and when that pattern is broken, it makes it harder for them to adapt quickly enough. So then we see some of the trees suffer, and some of the trees have diseases impact them because they're stressed a little bit more. So guys, let's take a 5-minute break. I know y'all need to stretch your legs. While you're doing so, please look at some of the plants around. Sorry. And we'll be back at 7:08.
Happened last when you talked about
Airbnb place. Oh my God, my house has shifted to the other direction now. Even though when I rain, now everything's tight.
Oh, I
But
have
as soon as it dries out a little bit, it'll get better.
I have a clay loam, and when it rains, it just absorbs it.
Yes.
And
Your
then
windows don't open or your doors don't shut, one or the other.
yeah, I live in Fairmont, so my Airbnb
Oh,
was
I live in a prime place.
oh, well, close enough. We understand each other. Yes.
And you know what, again, I'm used to being that you started from fresh. So we were moving whatever. He was bringing from other places. Yeah, that's not.
I know there's a lot of information.
And that's what I want. Oh, so this, I was looking. But eventually now I see which slaves, you know, how they play together, fair or not fair. And also now I can have the fact about some what area I can so it's hard to, I mean, I started very so therefore they will know. Hopefully someone can figure out. Well, there's Yes. I went to see, I didn't see
It was really fascinating. It was just like,
and that's what it is. It's like, actually, again, things coming from I grew up in Mexico. Yeah, well, probably the southern part of I used to see that. Wow.
yeah. It was amazing, but now I'm just like fascinated.
There's a book called Red that talks about
and it was written by like came with the Spaniards. He was talking about what their principles were and wrote it down. Sort of
I haven't bought it, but I'm perfect rich. I actually have Amazon all already dehydrated, so you can use it for a summer.
collecting it, but she didn't.
I just added the other to my Amazon cart. I know it's so many other things like that. I will never be able to read all the books I have in time
Yeah, and it's probably a little bit sick. So you're kind of that's all. You're just, no, I think it's not. It's when you guys do it, and you're making it harder to go. Because the elevator, you take it, and if there's something like that, you know, yeah. No, I mean, I think so, just so we can get on time. Is that what they do? I don't even know which one
So there's a couple of people I think will probably be able to ID these right because they have an advantage. But y'all feel comfortable if there's a little quiz for these plants? IDing the plants. No, this is not a grading. This is just the knowledge of what we have growing here if you've seen it before. But yeah, and then we'll do the activity. So there'll be another break before we gather into our groups. Does anybody have any questions at this time or anything you want to share with others?
This is, do you have like a list of all of the specimens so that we can kind of, you know, figure out the shape?
I will give you the list. This is, because when you said you have a list, I do, but there's so much more that I did not take out. So I don't know which ones I just decided to hang on.
Okay.
But I do have a list. Yeah, and once again, so you start noticing their habitat, the type of soil they prefer, you get a little bit easier at narrowing down what it is. So again, with just throwing them out there, it's hard. It'll be hard, to be honest. But again, I have an advantage because I've seen them and worked here to see where they go. Okay, guys, so cool thing, schnapps are the elements that make 99% of life living in the world, essential for plant growth and the plant development. We're not going to go every single detail of each one, but there's the macro nutrients and the micronutrients. So of course, plants will need carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen for them to grow and do well. And of course, in addition, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and so on and so on. How does that play a factor in the soil? Remember, what we're trying to see is the big picture of how everything is related. Nothing stands by itself. That the soil does affect what nutrients get absorbed and how. So again, when we try to plant something from a store and we want them to grow here without doing our homework, we're just making someone. We're spending money. We're losing money. So, so keep in mind when you plant things, when you look at your area, if you have limestone in the back, I wouldn't plant an American apple, you know. If you have maybe a something like that. But if you have a moist area, I wouldn't have plant a Texas ash. You know, things like that to consider. So all this information, it's available if you look at the terminology given. So pH and soil nutrient availability can give you an idea. Okay, if my soil is a little bit more acidic, what may be lacking in that area. And the trees do it naturally. The trees will figure out, and that's important not to remove all the leaf litter. They have what they need to keep on going, that cycle. So again, we'll talk micro, the spelled carbon, we know that it increases the biomass, it's the growth, it's produced, it's used by photosynthesis, the process of photosynthesis. Of course, nitrogen, it's constituent of amino acid, proteins, chlorophyll, and nucleic acid, very important. Potassium, you can see where they can find them. So most of them, look at how many are in the soil, quite a few. So we only think of plants and forests, oh, they only need oxygen and CO2 and water. There's so much that they need more than that, but we don't see and we might not understand. So keep that in mind. As people have to produce with what limited amount of sources they have, farmers, like someone mentioned, are becoming savvy to understanding that cleaning a place and removing it from all matter, organic matter, and then bringing it in might not be the best thing to start with. So nitrogen, very important. especially if you have nitrogen fixing plants, legumes. Why? Because nitrogen is such a stable element that it needs to be broken down to be absorbed by plants. And that it takes a lot of energy. And remember, nature is trying to be efficient, not lose energy. So that could be, nitrogen can be fixed by a lightning, and then it kind of gets transmitted down to the soil, or it can go through a process, several processes. So bacteria, this is where bacteria become a good factor for soil and plant growth, because the nitrogen fixing plants, which are the legumes like honey locusts, bluebonnets, throw me some more, partridge seed, eastern red, but they produce pods. They have that bacteria in the root nodules that are able to, the bacteria gets to break down the unstable nitrogen, something that they can be absorbed. And guess what? Plants share. So if that's why, if you ever thought, why are they throwing bluebonnets in areas of disturbed air, you know, the side of the roads or in areas that have nothing else growing, it's because they're able to adapt quickly because they have a bacteria that will help them get nitrogen. So they have an upper hand. And then of course other trees will move in. So something that I read in a book that I recommend, and I'm just gonna say before I forget, if you ever want something really cool, maybe you're taking a trip or listening. Has anybody read the book? The Hidden Life of Trees? What's the name of it? The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter. Oh, how do you pronounce his name? Yeah, I'm not sure. He talks about a forest wants to be a forest. It wants to have this community. It's like we always talk about anthropomorphic and try not to put connections sometimes too close to human feelings. We always want to be in a community. We are a community of people that love nature. So in this book, he kind of says it that a forest wants to be kept a forest. So a plant community wants to be invite others that share some interest or same ability. So nitrogen fixing plant, honey locust, cedar elm, they're kind of helping out. So when you said eastern redbud, I thought, oh, that plant is helping other plants. Oh, sorry. Well, ammonia, uric acid, the poop. And it's broken down. Yeah. So there's another way of getting nitrogen. There's three ways: either bacteria, or it's through decomposers breaking it down from the bunny, the scab, the droppings. But again, think about nitrogen. It's all around us. It's one of the high elements around us that we breathe. But it's so stable that for the plants to use it, they have to, by means, either electricity, but we don't have that much. Think about lightning happening all the time, but we have, again, a good community of bacteria, especially the ones in nitrogen fixing plants. We have decomposers, and then of course the nitrates. It's all the process.
So he represents all animals.
The P, yeah, birds, uric acid, urea.
I just noticed the denitrifying bacteria. So that's taking, some of them take it from the atmosphere, some of them
Throw it back through, yeah.
some nitrites.
So again, the way the process is a little bit complex. It's chemistry, but the big picture is that bacteria, decomposers, help make this process a little bit more easier for plants to absorb it, especially because in the atmosphere in general, it's not easy to absorb. So when we think of bacteria, when we tell our kids bacteria, ooh, I always think, let's take a step back and say, well, there's good bacteria and those that are not beneficial to us. So just keep in mind, bacteria is not all bad. Okay, we probably always understand, we are taught that for the carbon cycle, of course, we teach our kids, feed the tree by breathing air to it, and then it's going to absorb it and it's going to grow. Well, yes, it will help. I wouldn't say it won't, but as you can see, carbon's everywhere, carbon dioxide, and it's absorbed by trees and it's stored as biomass or drop down, and then other animals take that and it's part of their biomass. And of course, respiration, when we release the gas, it goes back. It's a whole cycle. But there's also things that are happening underneath the soil. Again, relevance that soil is very important. We only get to sometimes study or are aware of what's above, but not what's underneath. And actually, soil it's an environment that is hard to study, because once you till it or once you break it, you disturb the ecosystem.
Questions on this slide.
Mhm.
The trees, do plants really release CO2?
When they break down respiration. Right, I'll show you here, right here.
I mean, usually the songs.
Yes, because when they respire at night, they make food. There's a slide for that one. There's a slide for that. Okay. Forest sequestration, which comes to mind, well, how can we do to mitigate what's happening with global warming and all this extra carbon that we emit on a daily, and there's not enough to absorb it. So in my question to you, I like to try to get us all thinking maybe the same, maybe not the same. If you had to choose a type of forest, and maybe I should move back so you don't see it. Maybe no, I'll let you figure it out. Which forest, a young, a medium, or a mature forest sequesters more carbon?
What, has it already or is sort of sucking it in?
Which one takes it in fastest? Actually, the youngest.
Oh.
The youngest. So then you're saying, okay, all the prairie, I'm going to turn into a forest, right? No, again, a prairie still sequesters carbon, but in a different way, mostly in its root system. Okay, so which one holds the most carbon sequestered? So then again, the conundrum is, what type of forest do you want? A mix. So in a natural ecosystem, a forest ecosystem, there's always disturbance. You'll have a sapling growing here and a mature by there. So a mixture will always have enough sequestration and holding of sequestered carbon. What happens is when we think of one, which comes to another slide, sorry, where we just cut down a tree that has so much carbon sequestered, thinking that it took years for that tree to sequester that much carbon. And we're putting a little sapling who will sequester carbon fast, but it will take time and it will have to deal with all the challenges of growing as a tree versus this tree that has sequestered all this carbon, but maybe it's in the wrong place because we need to move. Again, keeps on, trying to figure out how we can better our quality in our surroundings. So that kind of tells you a little bit of a forest sequestration. And this is a cool graph that shows how carbon stock is here. Most 44% is above ground, and then 4% is in the dead wood, and then of course 6% of whatever seasonal fall leaves fall, and of course 45% is in the soil. So all the things. So it's kind of even. Now let's think about forest in general. Who sequestered the most and where? So tropical wet, tropical moist, boreal moist forest. We are, I guess we're in the moist in this area. So our forest here sequester, but not compared to the tropical wet or the boreal moist habitats. But of all the biomes, all the ecosystem, which one do you think sequesters? That'll be wetland, forest, prairie, sequesters the most.
Wetland.
So this is a website from the NASA. NASA got this from NASA. That's pretty good. Carbon storage in Earth ecosystem. It's like, oh, wetlands. You just were in the wetlands. Do you think they were sequestering a lot of carbon? It's sinking into underneath all that muck that you're stepping on. trying to gain a shoe. Impressive. I'm like, oh my gosh.
You know, that's not on that graph.
Huh?
Wetlands is not on that graph.
Oh, this one?
On the left, on the left.
Oh. No, this was all above. Yeah, this is, yeah. So,
And they're only considering land-based ecosystems too. They're not considering lakes, oceans.
yeah, so we went for forest, which we teach our kids, hey, forest, plant them and they will sequester carbon. Yay, you know, they're helping. But not all forests are equal in sequestering the whole forest, not to judge one versus the other, but that's what we have here in our area. But then you think about all the ecosystems that are being destroyed because we think they're not sequestering as much. I would never have thought a wetland, but as you put things together, okay, you're getting some stuff there. Where do we fall? So here's the green, dark green is the soil, gigatons of sequestered carbon. The gray is the atmosphere, which I don't see that gray color here, but the plant and animal life is the lighter green. So animal life, the tropical forest sequesters. And the forest is the first is croplands, farmlands. Savannas, that could be a little bit of us prairie savannas here. Well, that's tropical farm. I'm impressed. Oh, temperate grassland, that's us. Look, all the roots. And Michelle will talk about this. I'll give her credit. She will say, we would think the forest sequesters all the carbon, but.
What are those units, I'm sorry, under the green half circles?
That's gigatons.
Tons?
Gigatons, yes.
Okay.
It's a little bit fuzzy for me. That's impressive, guys. I think it is. I'm like, oh. Hooray for forest. Give them credit. Yeah. But we get to see that. And I think that's what happens is that we get to see those factors in front of us. But if we don't get to see them, we tend to sometimes ignore them.
And that would be in the ground, right?
And the dark green is in the ground, in the soil. And atmosphere, which it shows supposed to be gray, but maybe the graph, the picture, but the light green is in plants and animal life.
So when like the Amazon gets burned and cut down and people are farming, how quickly does the ground-based carbon release? Is it less stable once those tropical forests are cut down?
It's lost completely because remember, there's not too much topsoil because there's this hydrologic cycle that is going in there. The slash and burn effect that they do is deplenished. It's a hard way to recoup from that. If it's burned, it goes in the atmosphere really fast. If it's cut, it goes transferred somewhere.
I just can't imagine the soil-based carbon disappearing that quickly.
Well, that's because it's everything. Remember the layers of the soil?
Yeah.
It gets leached out. It doesn't stay there. It's not much of layering happening in the rainforest.
It's not alive anymore.
It's not alive because it's a very fine cycle, very high tuned cycle. Yeah.
Follow up on Karen's question, so I have my ideas, but which one's the quickest to be established
Wow.
and start taking that in?
I think grasses have an advantage.
And wetlands would be faster than a forest, right?
Yeah. But we think of wetlands as mosquito infested areas with alligators. Not if there's a balance. Not if there's a balance. Don't get me wrong. I go downtown and in my neighborhood, I go outside and the female mosquitoes are all over me. Here at night hikes, I hear one or two, but that's it. There is a balance. And again, as master naturalist, I was taking a step into, and I know Sam was talking, the master. I don't know everything. And when someone does say that, I should be cautious. Because the more I peel layers and layers, I'm like, what? I used to sell my kids a forest system, which is still good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna say forest bad, prairies. Everything creates a biodiversity that is very beneficial to everything else. So in its location, it does have a very good value. The problem is when we decide which one is better than the other, and we don't have all the facts to give that. So.
Well, one thing I wanted to kind of ask you is, I think that sometimes in the urban areas, you can see these places that have signs that say mosquito shield, and so there's been spraying, and so maybe some of the lizards and some of the other predators that would eat mosquitoes, are not there anymore.
Yeah, I really believe that we sometimes do things that are really bad instead of good for us. For example, and I'm gonna, from my perspective, in my area, I had throw my husband on the bus, and he can come and say he did that. He used to put pier beam house. We used to get raccoons and opossums living underneath, and they brought fleas. And I have a dog, and I'm like, oh my gosh, So at the beginning, we put bombs, to kill them. And then as I started learning more and more and more and more working care, I'm like, I'm giving those fleas an advantage because I removed all the predators. If I'm patient enough, what would happen if I let all the spiders and all the other bugs that eat fleas come in and be tolerant of them because they're not the cutest sometimes? What would happen? It has taken time for me to, because my husband, again, love my husband, love my husband. He says, oh, they're in my house and that's their dominion and this is mine. Okay. You know where I work, And he eventually we haven't put any pesticides or chemicals. Don't get me wrong, there is sometimes fleas, seasonality, moisture, but never to the point where I'm like, oh my God, my socks are crawling. I think that's what also happens is that given time, but we as humans, and don't want to throw shade at us, we expect everything.
Especially as an area.
Yeah, right here, I want this to be prairie or this to be forest and never give it time. So please, if anything out of tonight, it's like, look at things closer and see that the value of soil and atmosphere plays into a major component of how everything grows. From the wetlands that you were in last week, to the forest that you'll be in, to the prairies that Michelle will take. That's a pretty good slide. Oops. Sorry. Oh, one of my famous, and into the forest I go to lose my mind and find my soul. What is that term that it's been passing on that is called forest bathing? I think it's a different term given now, but people go hiking because there's some piece of going out there. So photosynthesis and respiration, you were talking about, does it produce carbon or, so this is something that happens. And again, sometimes we forget. I'm trying to figure out where I want to be. So photosynthesis happens during the day, diurnal. Oxygen is released as carbon dioxide is taken, producing sugar, and the minerals and water absorbed to make the biomass of the plant. At night, when there's not the solar radiation, the amount or the quality of it, then oxygen is needed and carbon dioxide is released to use some of that food that it has to store. Because it has to eat, but has to use it. It's like us making a meal, but then I don't know how to relate that. But it does release it when it takes that glucose back into use for living. Does that make sense? Anybody wanna?
That's okay.
Okay, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so humans and other animals only have one little part of the cell, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell that eats the sugar, helps us process the sugars. And one of the waste products of that is carbon dioxide. That we need to breathe in oxygen in order to use that sugar, and that sugar gets broken down. That's part of
This
this.
is just
But
mitochondrial work in the plant cells.
yeah, so plants
Which
during
is the same thing.
yeah, plants have mitochondria too. So since there's no during the day, because they have sunlight, they have the energy to create the sugar. But at night, since there's no it's like turning on your diesel generator. You just switch over to
I'm
the
sure it's
solar.
something I forgot from college.
No, and this is what I said, this is the ecological concepts that we forget, that sometimes it's different as we grow up and we see it into the whole perspective than just the textbook. Cool fact, this is college, this is STAR test problem material. CO2 is the H2O, photosynthesis. I used to memorize it.
So what happens like in Norway and Sweden when they don't have any night per se in the summertime? What happens to the plants up there? Is that weird? Do you know where I'm going with? Like in
Yeah, I
Alaska,
think-
when you don't have a night, it's all day.
Yeah, it's a given time.
Well, is that during the winter time though, when they don't
Yes,
have light? 'Cause
yes.
At that point, it's too cold.
Dormant.
No,
to support-
no, it's not. No.
It is
in
summer?
Sweden, it's in summer. So you have the solstice up in like Norway and Sweden where everybody goes and it's day, all day. So I'm just wondering what the plants, because it's definitely
They go
summer.
crazy.
Is that what they do? They go crazy?
Absolutely huge in Alaska. Yeah, they have a really, yeah.
I wondered how that- that-
That's huge.
Like
probably
pumpkins, so they like the world prize pumpkins they grow in
Do they-
Alaska.
Is that how?
So
That
So
must
this
be
growing
because of this.
Stresses the
Why.
plants out of it.
Oh.
That's a good question. I'll look into
That's
that. No, and that's perspectives that we never consider. Again, I am basing it upon what I know here and where I've grown up. But in places where there's what they call it, the midnight sun, and then yeah. I've seen all the TikToks, guys, and so people that report their daily happenings and that there's no nighttime. Like, I love sunlight, but man, I do like to sleep in darkness. Or,
It's bright sunshine.
no, but it's still there's. They see the sun.
Yeah.
So this is good. I like this all kind of, and this is, we are again a community, like you mentioned, a tribe of people that are trying to relate to nature and to share with others. So how does light? Now, when we said nighttime is no light, that is not true. It's the quality of light, the type of light. Some animals, infrared, the electromagnetic spectrum that is out there that we only think of visible light. But again, light quality affects the intensity, the biomass, which is talking about Alaska creating big pumpkins or big fruits. Also changes the morphology, how the plants, if an oak tree is at the edge of the forest and versus a little bit inwards, the morphology of that plant will be different. So keep that in mind. It doesn't want to have a greater surface area to get cooked in the summer. It might have a little bit more of a smaller compared to its counterpart that is more in the shade. Light duration, it also affects the flowering when it blooms. So again, now that our nighttime is getting longer, things are happening to plants that are okay. I'm giving up for, especially deciduous trees like that. I'm not productive as much. So let's cut our losses and wait for next spring. So, and that can consider that for your plants as well, indoor plants. Let's still move on. I know I love to talk and I'm running out of time, so I may skip a couple. My bad. Because I want to talk about this forest stratification. You can see when we go in the forest, we will see the high top of the canopy in some areas, a really high emergent layer, canopy layer, the understory, and the underlayer in the forest floor. So we're most likely to see the under the canopy in some areas here. Though our trees are not tall, some areas like our river bottom has very, very tall trees. How does this play again? It's crown classification. There's how trees play amongst each other. There's always one that dominate, that beat the game to the sunlight, and it's grown and was at the perfect place, perfect soil, everything. Versus the co-dominant that are there, but they're not fully out in the sun exposure. Versus the intermediate, taking spaces of the gap, and then the shrubs and the suppress. The suppress are kind of what I think when I was walking. They're trying to make it. They're just waiting for that perfect scenario where the tree next door falls and he can get mine. And then of course the ground comes. If you ever go out, especially in winter, this is fun to watch. Crown shyness. It looks like little, you look at the canopy and you can see how the trees kind of do not interweave with each other, but that could be the factor of them, you know, hitting each other, knocking some branches, but they're competing for sunlight, so they don't want to be. One wants to take advantage, but it tries, the others kind of doesn't have it. But it's a beautiful scene. There's a lot of. So cool. I'm gonna stay here for a while, guys, so we can move on faster. So forest succession, it happens, changes the rule. In the forest, you get to see it. Next, standing by a fallen tree is one living, decomposing matter in front of you. There's so many different models of succession. You can see the biological legacy. You can kind of see, oh, this tree was huge, so it must have lived a couple of years, depending where it grew. The land use, you know, what happened? Why has it been disturbed? Pre-settlement forest composition, was this first growth forest or not? And what kind of succession is it following? So again, typical from start, there's nothing, it's barren, it's just a parent rock. And of course, the first ones that move in are lichens, and then slowly your grass and so on, the first pioneer plants. And then later the shade tolerant oaks and hickory. What causes it? A couple examples are volcanic, retreating glaciers and landslides. It's an immediate removal of any biotic matter. What we get to see here more around here is the secondary succession, where we see a fire, a cut, destruction of an ecosystem. And then you still have some leftover remnants of the plant community, so that will take advantage of that. And then you will move again to the climax community, the most mature community that we have there. And again, we may see it in our lifetime, and we may not see it in our lifetime. So again, cross timbers, I personally think it's pretty impressive, because that's past my lifetime for him to get there. And this is important, especially if you're looking for wildlife. Look at your canopy, your forest succession, because you won't find the same thing at the edge of a forest or an area disturbed versus a mature forest. If you ever, again, throwing back cross timbers, be more mature forest, the limbs are not to where I can see. They're very tall. They've reached the max. So birding might be a different perspective than going to a disturbed forest like Fortail Creek or Wild Plum. Okay. Anybody read Aldo Leopold? It's another must. It's easy books. I mean, easy books is like not technical, but it's stories. And it's so he who cuts a better burrow owns more than a tree. He owns an historical library and a research seat in the theater of evolution. Yes, okay. To the discerning eye, his farm is labeled with a badge and a symbol of prairie war. Because technically, forests, especially up here, when you drove up here, there's a little pocket of prairie and there's edge forest. I always say they're competing with each other. One year the prairie's winning, the other year the forest is winning. But what Aldo Leopold is, those trees hold a lot of history, and we sometimes never fathom like how much they have seen. So we're coming to our area. Tree anatomy. I'm gonna do this a little bit. We're probably familiar with the heartwood, but I'm gonna show this picture better. Sorry. So when we look at a tree, the inner part, the hardwood, is actually the dead part of the tree. It supports the tree. The pith is the beginning, the center of the what used to be the sapling. The sapwood is the living part, the one that is throwing food up and down. The inner bark includes living cells, which sugars transport them to the phloem and xylem perspective. The outer bark is the dead tissue. The cambium layer, which beavers love to eat. Beavers do not eat the bark. They just tear down the bark to get to the cambium layer. It's a protective layer that produces the growth rate. That's the living part of the tree. So dendrochronology, guys, this is fun. If you ever have an opportunity to find a tree cookie or a tree stump, yeah, a pretty mass, this can take time. Michelle Villafranca did this. She has property and she had a tree that had fallen. She cut it down. She counted the rings. It takes time. But it can tell you, remember what Aldo Leopold, it tells you a little bit of history of the area. What has it seen? Was it a rainy season? Was there a lot of growth? Was it a dry season? There was little growth. Was there a fire that burned half of the area? Therefore, the green rings kind of look skewed, not even. So again, when you count the rings, either you count the white or the darker rings. You don't count every single one because then you're doubling the life. And of course, softwood versus hardwood. Softwood tends to grow faster. They're not as strong. They don't have a lot of tannins in them. So sometimes they get more living things trying to eat their way in. Cool facts. This will be fun with our hike. So for our hike, a little head start for that is that I invited a city forester to come, and you can ask her all the city ordinance questions you want, and she'll probably know them better than I. But she will help you. Like the bark is like a fingerprint of a tree. It gives you an idea, a start of what it could be. So when you describe a tree, don't only look at the leaves, look at the whole structure, and the bark can give you clues of what it is. So it has cracks, it has furrows, does it have lentils, how it breathes through in and out through the bark. Is it smooth like a possum paw? Is it has scales or strips like a sycamore? Keep that in mind when you have descriptions of your tree around you. Fun. This is, I think did y'all look at them a little bit closer on your field trip? So easy way to memorize this. Freddy fungus and any algae took liken to each other and formed a symbiotic relationship. I think that's kind of memorable. So yeah, you will see this, and people still when they go on hikes with me, they ask, is the tree sick? I said, no, it's living. It's actually holding a structure that is symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi. So there's so many. There's a whole book, a manual. But the most common that you get to see here around us, and this is from INAT, is the golden eye lichen. That's beautiful. Oh.
Some trees, though, depending on what kind of fungus it is indicative that the tree is suffering from some sort of wound or trying to overcome.
Yes, the saprophytic fungi. So this brings it right in. So name this relationship. So again, kind of knowing about how much which habitat or ecosystem sequester carbon. We didn't give mushrooms enough credit, I think, a long time ago. So there's relationships. They're sometimes good. Sometimes they're not. They're opportunistic. So the saprotrophic fungi are the ones like the bracket fungi you see. They're taking advantage over the opportunities given to get nutrients from living things. And then we have the mycorrhizal fungi, the network of hyphae that are helping each other pass nutrients that plants need in return for some of the sugars that the plants produce. So when you see a mushroom on the forest, and it's better after rain because it's perfect environment, it's for them to spread the spores. It's a fruiting body. That's the terminology when we see a mushroom on the ground. It's fruiting, and hopefully the spores are going to be spread. Now, homework for tonight, guys. Excited, right? I'm going to pass this. So mycorrhizal fungi increase the root system surface. So it allows the roots that cannot grow any further to get the minerals needed by the mycorrhizal fungi who spread the little hyphae a little bit better. So it's a relationship happening all the time. But the homework comes here. I want you to, does everybody listen to or watch TED Talks? Okay. Homework for tonight. Dr. Suzanne Simmer. she has an awesome TED Talk. I keep watching every year. And there's actually a book, which I have not gotten, about her, talking about her discoveries. So she discovered that.
Other tree.
Mm-hmm. You've seen it, right? Yeah. It's really good, right?
Yes.
So when I walk in the forest, I think of her all the time because of what she said. So like us, that we protect the loved one for family. She has noticed that there's mother trees, big, massive trees that make a difference in their community. And their interconnected network underneath the roots allows them to help each other, like us helping the family. So listen to her TED Talk on a filter. Let me know what you think, because there's communication with trees. We think they do not communicate because we're thinking like a human. Chemistry is really valuable for them. So she did the love ground connections between Douglas fir, mother trees, and seedlings, and she noticed the influence. Like if a tree noticed there's like a pest coming into them, they send probably chemical signals out, and the other trees were able to buffer a little bit better the infestation. So I hope that is happening with our ash trees around here, and and that I'll tell you more. Sorry, guys. I want to keep it time, and I want to make sure that we all finish to the. So wildlife condo, what do you think about this? If you had this in your front yard, would someone be knocking on your door the next morning? In my neighborhood, probably, or the city will be telling. But I think it adds character. One thing I do not understand is this picture I'm about to portray the message. Bird box. The bird will probably prefer this. But it's trying effort. Maybe it was a lie when he did it.
It looks more like a bathhouse.
Which an outhouse? Oh,
Yeah.
maybe a screech owl, maybe or something like that. But again, I think a cavity will be better, something more understood by an owl than that. But what I want you to remember is a dead tree still values. It's called a snag, a standing dead tree. It has value to the community. From mushrooms to scorpions to wasps to birds to owls to bats. A wildlife condo was made by a dead tree. And Kenneth will show you this because he loves turning things over. Finding all the macro, all the invertebrates that are in there. So from fungi to beetles to termites. I think they're cool. Okay, we're coming to the part where the stresses of a forest community. So as you can see here, we have your invasive invertebrates, the plants, the non-native plants, the fungi that are not beneficial, that consume and take everything, versus the detritus, the earthworms, invasive detritivores, to your cats that destroy. I have a cat. I know you will hear stories about them. I have to, yeah, felines do a lot of like damage in an urban setting. But I still love the cat. So this is forest fires. That's probably the most common that you hear out in California. Of course, the drought, hurricane season, logging, a lot insects. I mean, there's a lot of stresses happening into forest community. So there's a lot of things plus the abiotic factors that they have to face on a daily basis. But let me talk about this one. Oops. So again, not too long ago, and I was here when it was happening, I was told there's a potential movement of this invasive beetle. Like, oh my gosh, you'll never get here while I'm working. I remember the young boy, Sam, and he was using iNav. He came to summer camp and he took a picture and uploaded it. He didn't know what it was. He just wanted someone to tell him what it was. A couple of years later, I think Sam Kitchener figured out, oh, this is something really valuable to look at. And it was the emerald ash borer. Again, that was a couple years back. I said, it's not gonna get here then. It's here and it's overwhelming. the nature center. And on our foresight, you will see how it's overwhelming the area. What happens when we find them? They're beautiful. I mean, give them credit. They're very savvy creatures. Beautiful metallic green. What makes them unique is that rosy abdomen when you look at them, but the eyes are also. But there's all other boars that are native. This is not native. So what happens is the boar will find ash trees, specifically ash trees, and will lay the egg mass outside, and they will burrow into the tree cambium layer, and they will girdle the tree. Once we see the emerald ash borers, that means they've been in that tree for a while. They've been eating their way out as they develop. What happens to the tree afterwards? Of course, it's not going to live. It's going to be stresses of drought, stresses of not being able to create biomass and feed the tree. All our ash community around the building is affected. I don't know if you walk in next time when you're doing coming to the building, you will see at the staff parking lot ash trees that have this blonding, which means when the woodpeckers peel out the bark to be able to pack out, you will see the strips. And they're saplings. I mean, they're not old ash trees, they're young. So that means those emerald ash borers are here. So I did talk to a forester because the city forester does inoculate for regional champion, and I was able to follow them on that trip. This is the second time they inoculated this tree. They recommend every 3 years or 2 years to 3 years. I said, is there any future for the ash trees? They said those that become resilient will survive. Those, they're done. So genetic diversity is being lost by an invasive species. Not to its fault, it does what is natural to it. It's finding an ash and trying to reproduce, and that's what most living things try to.
Where is it native to?
Asia. It is, how can I say? So for example, Dallas foresters, they're inoculating the tree. They're paying a company to inoculate the tree. It's not 100%. So, I mean, it's somewhat successful because it has kept our green ash tree still living versus the community of ash trees dead. But it's a lot of money. It has to be done a certain amount. And until the emerald ash borers move out, if not, they'll just come back. So the hope is that because of the genetic diversity, there'll be one sapling that has something in its body that will be able to deter this insect from coming. That's what we're hoping. If not, the woodpeckers are having a meal. Yes.
What do you mean by inoculate? Like, is that like a vaccine for a tree?
Yeah, they actually, well, I shouldn't say inoculate, but they inject chemicals into the root system.
Oh,
And there's some terminology in it, but I just don't inoculation.
If the long-term hope is that a tree gets born that has a natural resistance to it, wouldn't that process be stymied by inoculating trees and keeping genetics of non-resilient
I
trees?
try not to be political, but yes.
How do you?
You're among
what is that
races.
concept?
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Because forest, and that's the thing when we plant monocultures. So I think the city of Dallas, this is from the, and you can ask Hannah, who's the forester, who talks to other foresters from other departments. She's saying that this Dallas is gonna pay to do that because they planted a lot of ash trees because they grow fast and they look beautiful. So it's our own kind of fault that we also created this, you know. But you're right. You're right. How would we ever, if we keep them, helping them out? But they're doing it because of the potential of a tree falling on a car parked by an ash tree. You know, they're very brittle. They fall down very quickly with the wind. Okay, question.
Do you know which ash trees Dallas planted?
I'm not sure if it's Texas or green ash. I'm not sure, but we can ask Hannah. I'll tell her, be prepared with your ash tree studies. So we do have a forester, and if you go out hiking here, you will notice these purple prisms, which is a color that these beetles seem to attract it, and they kind of have a pheromone that the female beetles seem to attract it to. It started, I think, 2 years, I think during COVID. I'm not sure how, but during COVID, they started bringing this here. And you will see one or two. This past summer, we're walking with my summer kids. We see them, pick them up. I have a little jar of how many I picked from here, like, or ash trees. I said, I know, put an human feelings. I said goodbye to my little ash trees so that I see every year growing around my parked area. But it is the cycle. And hopefully there's nothing that we know we can do at this time. So it's sticky. They stick to it. It's sticky. So again, this is just a basic trap, insect trap, but it captures so much more. But because of the purple and the pheromones they use, I'm not sure what kind of pheromones for the specific, they seem to attract. And one side, there was one at the boardwalk put, there was one here by the dumpster here. I don't know where the other one. Service center.
Yeah, but I think these only attract the males. The
Pheromones?
that they use in these.
Maybe that's
female, the pheromone the female puts
Oh,
out.
so
So
that's
you only get the males on this, and the females are still running around. So if she's already
mated.
been mated, then she's laying her eggs in the cycle. Yeah, but he can't mate. He can,
But it takes, they create multiple.
yeah. Yeah.
So what I found interesting, and I did ask the forester, because they come and collect the traps and kind of put new ones. I asked them, what location is the hot spot or the hot zone? Where's the club? Where's the party? It's around the building. It's around the building. And again, we're hoping that the woodpeckers are taking advantage, but there's so much they can do without, even though they're pecking at the tree, they're still harming the tree. So, okay. Of course, everybody loves Bambi and deer, but deer over here can overwhelm what grows. And as you can see in this picture, an area that was fenced in where they were not allowed to browse versus an area where they browse. So we have deer surveys happening at this time. We have never in my time here had to do anything about it because Jacksboro Highway kind of helps and everything around, but it's keep in mind that though we love mammals, they can still have a major impact on the plant community and therefore overall everybody.
So the actions are in the passing part.
They were probably right here. Like, feed me. I mean, coyotes in a pack, bobcats, but they were. Yeah, so this was the trend last year, so I kept it. One trend meaning that it was talked about a little bit more in the news. So hammerhead flatworms, if you see them, do not cut them. They will regrow. They are, they eat other things. If you find it, put them in a jar and call the ag extension and let them know because they are bad. And people tend to kill, you know, and actually this, I don't know the process, but they tend to make more.
Yeah, so it's like the starvation.
So, well, I do not know the process. That's a little bit beyond me, but something scientists should study. Yeah. Have you found them? Okay. Oh. Yeah, they eat. They're predators. Kind of the same stuff. So, okay, let's bring out a discussion. Your purchasing power has a major effect of all of this. These animals were moved because some of them moved things that they hitched a ride with, or we wanted that plant because it's beautiful in Europe, but we want it right here. We as now citizens, we need to consider what we purchase now that we know how it can play a major role in everything. And of course, building around the nature, building all around us, actually, not just around the nature center. There was, of course, this I see here around as you drive in the area. invasive plants, please know them. I know we have a couple. I want to say I didn't introduce them. But before this became a nature center, this was leased property, and therefore everybody planted whatever looked good on them. So we got bamboo because of the forest. Anybody work for the Forest Zoo? Because I think when the Forest Zoo was developed, they said, let's have plenty supply of food for animals. So we have a bamboo patch. Of course, we have privet. We have nandina, because I think in the 1970s, 80s, that was like the hottest plant out there to buy. Privet, because it's an evergreen and it does attract some pollinators, but not the diversity. What's another one that we have here? There's so many. Johnson grass.
The paper mold.
KR blue stem, yes. And Michelle tried to remove it, but it's like, it's horrible. Russian olive, tamarisk, tree of heaven, vitex, wisteria, elephant ear, please, please keep it in your house. God. Yeah, Japanese honeysuckle smells good, but this is privet. Yeah, if you go up, not Plum, Prairie Dog Town area, lot of privet. Yes, we do. I think they're cute, but yeah, but they're.
My neighbor has one.
I know. There's another one that is it's really raspberry pear. Thank you. Yeah, they're not. Now, again, there was a fad. Everybody, my neighbor had it. I want one, so let's plant it and let's plant them all around. Keep in mind, diversity is good. You know, diversity is good. Sure.
Did you say the pear, what the raspberry pear was invasive?
Yes, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, the smells, the memories. Yes. Yeah. I mean, sycamore. And this is just a list. There's plenty of more. There's an invasivetexas.org that you can see all of those. Yes, ma'am.
Why is poison ivy on the list?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Because it's invasive, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not native. It's a threat.
It's
native.
Oh, so that's the good terminology.
Vitex is native to Texas, and it's actually Vitex is superstar. Vitex is not native. I don't think Vitex. Your native plant people.
Kudzu is not native. Giant cane, no, not native. It's interesting. I will have to look at that. Okay, guys. Uh-oh. Okay. Well, this is good. This is the discussion we need to have. This is what we need to, as a community, go out as master naturalists. We need to kind of, and like researchers, new things we learn, and we have to understand that what we learned before doesn't mean it's any more current anymore. You know, we have to move as to what we know. So it evolved. Yes. So arborist versus forester, what is the difference? Anybody want to tell?
You can't see the forest for the trees.
So this is forest management. And as an ecologist, it's different perspective than a forester perspective. So a forester wants to see it for what maybe you can gain out of it, you know. So of course they will be thinning. Nothing wrong, because I use paper, I use things out of it. But you notice they want this straight structure with the straight bowl. They want limited competition versus, you know, the natural where you see the cycles of living and death. And then of course you can see different ways of managing the land. That is definitely for first to talk about that. But I just wanted to say there's different perspectives to how a forest should be. My opinion is it should be always changing, ever evolving, ever adapting. But again, I am not using it to sell wood. Yeah. Oh, yes.
The word forester means somebody working for a timber company
forester is someone that sees the value of a tree for different perspectives. Industrial, maybe.
Treating trees as a commodity instead of a.
Ecologists will be more like the connections of the everything. And an arborist talking about the health of the tree and the way it grows. So we've had foresters come here and they talk about all the invasive plants and invasive bugs because they're worried about the value of the tree as it's being grown. Ecologists will come here and talk about how they all play and play not only for the tree, but the other animals involved that live in the forest. And an arborist will come and say, hey, let's do this inoculation to protect this tree, or this is how it needs this mineral, this more water, things like that. So, and that's something that you get to see more as they play together, I guess, like they get in the community.
Typical arborist will prune your tree, so comes out and prune your tree or arborist.
Because they know the health and what to do. But not all arborists are treated the same. Make sure you know your arbor. You have to have a good one. We hope to do this. DBH is something that people, when they come out and kind of look at the trees, DBH is it kind of takes a measurement of the tree community in an area to see how much biomass it has accumulated. It can tell you what stage of development. I want to try to do this in our field trip. It depends where we go. They're supposed to build a boardwalk or start construction. I'm not sure if that's happening this week or not. So it takes certain tape measures. It's fun to kind of see which trees in the DBH on the stir forest versus a cross timber forest versus the riparian forest. You will see firsthand. Ooh, oak wilt. Well, then my friend Hannah said we had a problem. I'm thinking of only emerald ash forest, but she said we have oak wilt at the nature center. I'm like, okay, well, let me tell me more. She kind of emphasized a little bit of the highlights, but what happens is a fungal infection. You were saying that fungi are not always beneficial, like the mycorrhizal. Some of them will take advantage, and once installed in a tree and a red oak, really nothing else, but just to make sure it doesn't spread. It is, oh, I'm supposed to be caused by a native species of fungi, ceratocystis, and I'll leave the rest. Red oaks are particularly affected, but it does affect all oak trees at some degree. Enters through the bark wounds and or via roots grafting, especially common in live oaks. So how do you notice? You just notice the stress and the changing of the leaf color. The wilt that you will see, and again, it tends to be more predominant in red oak, but it affects all. Does anybody have a wilt in your area that you've noticed? No, that's good. Okay, fun part. Okay, there's so much fun parts. So the FYI, we are in the nature center. We have a sliver of western cross timbers. So that's the forest we're going to take a look at a little bit more. Then a little bit downtown is Fort Worth Prairie, but it's interesting that there's not that much prairie left over because we became a forest community. Nothing wrong with that. So Tarrant County, we have several types of forest. We have the cross timbers, which is dry uplands and sandy soil, limestone, types of woodlands, which is kind of more like living on the Cretaceous marl that we have within the Fort Worth Prairie. And then we have the riparian bottomlands by the Trinity River. And then of course, we'll have the urban forest that we created around the Tarrant County. Totally different. You notice all the picture I put, this is the Trinity River. What we envision a forest to be, most people, but what a forest is actually maybe look like. Cross Timbers Range, fun part of history. So it's one of those forests that very unique, endemic to the Americas. It ran all the way down here, but all the way to southeast Kansas. It had created two belts, the east and the west cross timbers. The most dominant tree that you will see as tree species will be oaks. It could be blackjack or post oaks. And over time, it's been used for so many things, and the remnants are scattered here in between. And I like to say that nature has a good chunk of it in its property. There's a book, Cross Timbers, the Ironclad Forest, I think. It's a great book to read, another one to read. It talks about how when the settlers were moving west, how they were all of a sudden prairie forest, and how they had to go through it. As you can see, a little better picture. Tarrant County. I know it's kind of nature centers at the north west. It doesn't show it, but we do have those similar components or Western Cross Timbers. This is from the book. I should not easily forget the mortal toil and the vexations of flesh and spirit that we underwent occasionally in our wanderings through the cross timbers. It was like struggling through the forest of Washington Irving. So it's a lot of historical value. It's a good forest. So what's the difference? Eastern versus Western. So the early tribals in the Eastern call this region the Monte Grande, Grand Forest. Few tracts of undisturbed woodlands remain. Dallas has grown. The city is large. And the soils in the cross timbers differ from the Western in that the Eastern is more fertile. There's therefore produces larger trees and a wider variety of trees and shrubs. Or section, the terrain of this subregion is very hilly. It has slopes, sandstone underneath with some pockets of limestone. And the surface, the topography is a little bit not as flat. Prairie and forest ecotone, so that's where both of them meet each other. And of course, post oak, blackjack, oak, woodlands, most of the west cross timbers. So how do those trees look like? Oh, sorry, I'm going fast. So indicator trees, this is cool to know, because if you see these two trees together, there's a likelihood that you have a sliver or a little pocket of remnant cross timber. So blackjack, you will notice it looks like a turkey foot, a lobe or duck foot, has a very unique canopy, very lobed. It doesn't change colors like fall colors. It goes from a green to all of a sudden like a brown. The post oak is the one that is more dominant here in our Western cross timbers habitat that we have. You will see that it has lobe. It looks like a T or a cross. What I like about this tree is that it prunes itself. You will see a lot of dead limbs that have fallen recently, and you will see the little knots that have formed on the side. Tells you that trees compartmentalize their need for photosynthesis. So if they don't need it, it's not getting enough light, let's move our resources up. So the existence of cross timbers, it tells us a lot. The past climate for dendrochronology, unaltered biodiversity. It tells us what might have lived here, what lives here. It tells a lot of history. And as you notice, these little limbs right here, this is where it prunes itself. It sounds like a very gnarly growth. Again, some of the trees here are over 300 years old. So Lake Mineral Wells State Park has some of that. Okay, so riparian bottomland forest. Question, how many forks does the Trinity River have? Hopefully you learned that in your wetlands. How many forks does the Trinity River have?
2, 3.
In Dallas and Tarrant County, to be more specific.
15.
Okay. Raise your hand if we say 3. Raise your hand if we say 4. Raise your hand if we say 50. No, there's actually 4. Trinity is the name given by the Spanish who moved to start claiming things for Spain. So west in the clear, Tarrant County, moves to East Dallas, east and out. So there's 4 forks. So there's a lot of history because then there's a community of forests that were dependent on that river. So what is it composed of? Or trees that love to have their roots wet in water at a given time, not all the time, not like recently. It's good drainage. The nature center, I think, still exists due to the fact that we're the watershed and we're a floodplain for the community in Lake Worth. I think that's one of our saving graces because we have the pretty river running around here. It's excellent for wildlife. You noticed, and if you just took a snapshot of the wetlands on a day, imagine seeing snapshots of it throughout the year and throughout decades. It's amazing. Sycamore, black willow, cottonwoods, black walnut, very unique trees, very cool. The black walnut, for me, smell like citrusy if you ever look at the fruit. The majority of our Texas riparian forests live in only in memory. Why? Because we channelized many. And then we built around them because they're beautiful. But therefore, this might not be beauty to some. And there's a old postcard of What the River. Thinking part of the history, they were actually thinking of putting a ferry all the way. If you're from Houston, all the way up here. That is crazy if they did. Look at that. Look at the riparian over there in Dallas. So again, a lot of benefits for having a forest by the river because it helps buffer how much water. Now, when we start removing that, of course, then that's when we have things happen. Oops, sorry. Oh, I'm trying. No problem. I'm sorry. I want to get to everything. I know I put a lot. So common tree is my favorite just because of the shape, are cottonwoods. So that you probably are aware that there's either female or male cottonwoods. So if you have the cotton, the fluff, the catkins, you have a female tree. Is it monoecious or dioecious? Some trees have both male and male and female parts versus some trees, the ones that produce fruit might be only the girls. And black willow. A lot of beautiful shapes that come to the black willow. If you go to the boardwalk, there's some impressive shapes. And if you look from far away, when they're early in spring, the little twigs kind of look like tip orange. So they look like they have a shaggy orange tip on the horizon. Beautiful. And they willow, they bow to the winds. Beautiful, beautiful. Fort Worth Savannah, that's where most of us get to see. We're in the middle. Most of Fort Worth is. A savanna, it's speckled with trees here and there, but mostly pockets of a lot of prairie grasses. So grasses and forbs dominate it. There's a dense clay pan, which we were talking about how clay affects the growth of plants. And again, who tends to establish themselves faster? My opinion is grasses. They're able to grow fast and they use the sunlight better. Disturbance of fire stimulates the growth of prairie grasses. So therefore, the woods kind of have to stay up, have thick barks to prevent not being cooked, but also have to understand that could happen in a cycle. Among hardwoods, trees, oaks, uniquely resistant to fire. And you can see that on our demo prairie that we tend to burn almost every year. Those trees that are living have faced a lot of fires during my tenure here, and they're still living. So urban forest, it's a hodgepodge. It can be native, it can be non-native, it can be what grows better, what looks good, the soil. It has been all brought in from different when it was developed. So who's to say what grows there? But this is our typical, this picture is a while back. You see some development here at Fort Worth skyline, but this is what most people consider of a forest. Very simple picture. But now that we know, we expect complexity. So for example, I love the far side. It's called a tree, and they serve a vital function in the ecosystem by providing a natural anchor to chain up trash cans. So urban nature trail. So we will say more than that. We are Tree City of USA. Actually, we're one of the first, which again, it's a contradiction, but don't get me wrong. I love my trees. This used to be a prairie dominant, but we have an agroforestry. Oops, did I do something? We're the oldest and longest running tree city US in US. And also look what, if we don't take care of our trees, this is what happens. I think this picture was taken by Rob Decas in San Antonio. You can probably guess what came first, the tree. They needed a shade for summer. You know that this is not looking good. I think it's a live oak to be precise. Poor tree. Yeah, many.
No friends.
No friends, nothing. So this happened last year. So John T. White, a neighborhood resident, Mockingbird Estates, he noticed that they just came and plowed a lot of the old post trees. And he's like, the quote that was said, I speak for the trees because the trees have no tongue. And he dressed like the Lorax. It's the community that makes people aware of things. And if it wasn't for him, those trees would have just moved without people really caring. But he made an effort. So again, knowledge is power.
So I live on a street. My house is right next to that. Like literally, I am the last house on the street. And there's a fence for construction that has on the other side. And when they did that, when I was living there, the amount of critters and animals that we got for like a couple of months, like 2 or 3 months after that was fun. So it was a very palpable change.
And don't get me wrong, I get calls here still. Like, I have a raccoon, can I release it at the nature center? You probably have heard of carry capacity, meaning there's a certain amount of environment, space, food, nutrition for the animals to survive. So bringing one in is not gonna help him or the others. And when we destroy a habitat, where will they go? And so I still kind of sometimes, again, I can say it because we're a tribe. Please don't let it go. I giggle sometimes when the people move out to the wilderness and they don't want the raccoons. I want a possum, but not the raccoons. And these are conversations I've had literally, where someone said, I wanted to feed this animal, but I didn't want the other one. I don't like snakes, so I want to, you move them away, so they're gonna find, they're living creatures. Again, I'll take out. Please.
The one thing I like to think about is like we can point the finger at them for tearing that down, but then just think about where your house is built.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like we're part of the problem, unfortunately.
Yes, but I think, yes, we are part of the problem, but awareness of where you purchase your purchase power has a lot of effect. So if you're going to a community that's just been developed versus just moving into areas that have already been disturbed.
Yeah.
You know,
good point.
I mean, you have your purchasing power talks. That's the way. That's the way. You can speak, you can, but don't buy privet. Go this way. Buy perennials. Yeah, do as much. And to be honest, younger generations will look upon us to by example. So my kids, I don't buy plastic bottles because I'm trying to show a message. And don't get me wrong, I like to get an easy bottle there. My kids will remind me. So heritage trees, you can look at this site on Fort Worth, City of Fort Worth website, and it shows our heritage trees. I'm in the middle of it. I'm in the middle of it. So you can see this was last year's snapshot, so it might be updated this year. But it shows where it is. Look at us, we're up there. We have the Chickapin Oak community. We have the green ash. What's the other one? The cross timbers. But the only species unique tree is the green ash. So that's pretty cool.
What's the range?
Those have passed away. If you click, you can see what caused their death.
Oh yeah, somebody killed the homeless person.
Yeah. So overall, and you probably, again, I don't know why I had to put this picture, but you know, trees do a lot. The community of trees, the forest does a lot. But you can see the benefits as we can see, especially as the earth keeps warming. We do need prairies, but we also love the shade in the heat of summer, right? And this is not silly. I park far away so I can get a shade of the tree. Half of it. Big park lots, but so think that in mind. Keep that in mind. So they were coming to our end. Now our last activity. Y'all want to know about the trees, the leaves, or do you want to do an activity together? It's open. Anybody want to take about this? I ran out of time, guys. Okay, okay, let's go about the leaves. So I'm gonna turn the light, guys. Sorry, guys. I'm excited for the conversation. Watch out for your eyes. We're gonna turn it on. So thank you so much for listening to this conversation. I hope you've learned a couple of things here and there. But let's learn what we can use to help us identify the trees in our area. So all the trees I've posted out here are representatives of the community that lives in certain types of habitats. It could be riparian, it could be savanna, it could be cross timbers. So, but how do we do that? How do we start breaking things apart to make it understandable for us? So there's dichotomous key, and we look at first the leaves. It's easier this time of the year than in the winter, because in the winter, then you have to go to twigs, and that can be a little bit more complicated. But you look at the leaves and you see simple, undivided lamina, no incisions or cuts. I know it's harder because I turned the lights on. So this is a simple one. Compound is divided into many leaflets attached to the mid vein, and I will show you one up there. I think I have it. Okay. I did not put any pinnate compound, which means there's one here at the end. That could be a pecan tree. And palmate, that is like skinny. So look at the leaves and how they're attached to the stem. That can give you a little idea if it's compound or not. Now I have to say that some of these specimens, they just got the leaves. They didn't get the whole stem. So it's hard to tell if it's a leaflet or a leaf. So here's a better idea. So a leaf here, compound. So how can you tell it attached to a tree? There's the bud. So this will be a bud right here, but if it's a compound leaf, you'll see the leaf and then the bud right here. No buds on the other nodes. It's hard to read. This is easy stuff. This will make you an expert on trees. Opposite, alternate. So when you look at a leaf, or is it branching opposite from one another or alternate? Clue number one for your safety. Poison ivy, alternate. Box elder, opposite. Why did I pick those two plants? They look, the structure of the leaf looks similar to each other. So box elder can be look like it's poison ivy, but if you can tell if it's alternate or opposite, you can touch it or not. There's a whole small group sport to tell this apart, but for limit time, this is rusty black hawk. You can see when you look at the leaf margins, you can say it's an undulate. It has kind of like a wave to it. Entire means it's smooth on the edge. Serrate means it has little tooth marks on the side. Or crenate, it has not sharp but it has little lobes as well. Lacerate has some sinuses, some dips to it. More in depth, you will go down to the base, and that it will help you differentiate some trees from others. Cordate, that's kind of like your redbud. Rounded, live oak. Square, sagittate, cunate, and alternate. See myself. Leaf shapes is pretty cool. They're linear, oblong, elliptical. And okay, so let me get you started on this. There's a couple of books that will help you. This is my favorite. This is Sibley Sky to Trees. It's all North America, so it's not this, but it's a starter because, you know, Sibley has beautiful bird pictures, right? Also trees. And it will not only show you the leaves, but also the buds and what it looks sometimes in winter, the canopy, the shape. And it also has the bark, which is all the factors you need to identify the tree. You cannot just do by leaf sometimes. It also shows you the ranges and the acorns to tell you the difference. So this I recommend. It's pretty cool, Amazon. But then if you become more specific, Trees of Central Texas. I don't know which edition this is. This is definitely more technical. It's not colorful, so you definitely are more advanced at your awareness of the leaf shapes and stuff, but it has more detail on the tree itself. So we're gonna go here. So leaf arrangement for this, and again, this I am basing it upon these connection. This is opposite. It's elliptical to obovate. So they can have two types of leaf shapes. It can be a little bit of both. There's not, sometimes a plant doesn't have one leaf shape, and it's finely serrated. And you can't tell here in this picture, but it has little tooth marks on the edge. Let's try this one. So anybody take a wild guess by just looking. It's native to this region. It loves water. It's hydrophilic. It looks like a cedar elm. And again, this picture doesn't give you justice because it's not comparable to size. It looks like wing elm, but it's an American elm. Again, if I had to scan this for when we did it online. So you can see serrated. Let me see. Alternate, obate to elliptical, and serrated. I know that you know this one. What is this one? Number 4. There we go. So alternate, orbicular, and entire, smooth on the edges. Oh, that was the activity we're gonna do. So let's go pick on this one. I'm gonna walk around. You don't have to tell me the shape, but audience, anybody want to take a walk? Let me tell you a little bit of where it grows, and then or you can kind of imagine. It loves moisture. It has found in the riparian habitat. And it produces a fruit that is remarkable, recognizable, that I only can 12 feet. It has, when you scratch the bark, it has an orange touch. And what makes me idea is how it just peaks out of it. Everybody runs this.
Mulberry.
Looks like a mulberry, but the leaves are large. Mulberry does like moisture. This is osage.
Which one is it?
Osage.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I wanted. This one. Hey, look, take a look. It is no. The sinuses are deep. Now there's a book about what species of red oak there are. Shumardi eyes. It says this is everybody get an intro book? It's a Veloz. The linear shape of the leaf makes it smooth around. Again, when you see it, it's just a snapshot, little snapshot of the planet.
Oh, gosh, this one? The shape and the upside down violin. Okay. What made you say this? The acronym is MAD maples, ashes, dogwoods. I love this one because every leaf may be different. It loves moisture or mold.
Paper mulberry.
It's a mulberry. Not sure which one. It didn't say.
Yeah, paper, I have this in my backyard. They come out with different leaves like that. So when you said it was invasive, I just freaked out.
You know, and mulberry trees here, again, there's a lot of disturbance going on the boardwalks. Who knows? Okay, this one, let me tell you, it's all loves well-drained soils. It loves, it can survive in poor nutrition type of soil. It loves, or you can adapt to living in it. Right? Cedar elm. Can't tell, because when you touch it, it's rough. This is another example of this one, number 8. It doesn't show its opposite, not opposite, alternate, sorry. It's endemic to the cross. Now, people consider it a trash tree, and that's a term I don't like to say because every tree has its type. Sugar hackberry. I didn't cheat on them. No, I know, that's what people consider. I don't know, I guess, I'm what trees oh, okay. Oh, she's not in the class? Oh. Take 10 points. Okay, and last one. I didn't put them in any order, but this is the one I kind of dedicate a full slide about it. What makes them unique is the samaras that you will see and might not see in insects. And this is opposite, but again, this doesn't show the branch. Okay, guys. Sugar hackberry. Sugar hackberry. It's a great scratching post. Okay, before you leave, guys, I know we are cutting it, but I need to tell, okay, trees to recommend. The Hidden Life of Trees. You can even listen to it. The Forward Library has it. I've listened to it twice, but I decided to buy the book because I want to. It's audible. No, please. It's good. It is. It is good. Yes, there was another one about wildlife on he wrote about. I bought them both. The cast iron forest, if you can find it, I don't know if it's on Amazon, but it's worth it. We used to sell it, but I don't know why not now, but well, it's a good one. And of course, if you are interested in just learning trees as individuals, the Sibley's Guide to Trees. Okay, exciting facts. Okay, so give me a heads up if you're running late. There's my number. I'll be here. I plan 3 guests to help us explore our habitats, our forest habitats. Yes. I will be there, but I kind of took a step back and said, I want to hear Hannah because I want to see. She's new to the city of Fort Worth. She's just moved in to her job now 2 years ago. September the 24th. Yes. Yeah. Everybody good? Yeah. I'm making sure because I put it in 9 to 3. Meet at the Refuge Service Center. From there, we will carpool. We have a very busy weekend. We have the NEPSOT, Native Plant Society meeting going on as well that day. So when you come to the gate, let them know. I'm here for Master Naturalist. If you don't tell her, she might assume she's going to send you over here. So we'll be meeting at the
Service Center. We'll carpool from there to our location. So keep in mind, try to carry light so you can move around. Dress comfortably and safety to consider because we're going to go off the trail. So far, the only thing we've seen is snakes, right? Copperheads, cottonmouths. As we worry, Britt was who was that when we saw the cottonmouth, the copperhead? Sorry. Oh yeah. Sturdy shoes, long pants required, just for your own safety. Ticks and chiggers, mostly ticks are still present around. Water bottle, insect repellent recommended. So who is coming? And I forgot to update with Hannah's information. So I have Tom Haas, who's part of the Fort Worth Audubon. He will taking you out on hike birding to see what moves in and out. I recommend 2 apps if you can have them. You probably already have them. Where is it? Merlin Bird ID and eBird or iBird Pro, whatever. I mean, both of them are good, but Merlin Bird ID is #1. I recommend. And you probably already have iNet, so we're good. He does recommend no flashy colors, so no like bright pinks or bright orange, because you're going to try to camouflage. So be able to see. Bring your binoculars if you have. If you need one, let me know. We do have some loaners. I just need to pack them from here and take them over there. And then we have Hannah from Forestry that will be also guiding, and she will help you with the ID of local trees. And also if you have any questions about what should I do for urban forestry, she will be the one. And then Kenneth wants to find more bugs, invertebrates underneath fallen trees and decaying matter. So he will be helping capture bugs. So please, so be mindful that, yeah, that will be it. And it's moist. I mean, it rains, so we'll have a diversity of them. So also iNat, please have it ready to go. Does anybody have any questions? Well, I want to say have a good night. Thank you for joining me. Oh, yes, ma'am.
So we need to bring our own lunch and everything.
Yes, please bring your own lunch, your own water bottle. We will make pit stops. The only thing I have a hiccup is if they're going to build something at the boardwalk, because that's where we lunch. It has a pavilion, it has a bathroom. But yeah, bring everything that you will need for that day.
And whatever you pack in, you pack out. There's no trash in that you noticed the last time we were here.
So, guys, it's been an honor.
Thank you so much.
I will see you in the building.
All right, thank you so much.
Really quick things, who wants to bring snacks this week? Okay, anybody else want to volunteer? Did you forget? Maybe 1 or 2 more people, anybody 3? And then the other thing, again, just another reminder, you have 45 days to get your hours put in for your training classes. So I guess we've been doing this is week 5. So we're getting closer to that 45 days. So definitely get those hours put in if you haven't, or if you're having trouble.
We should put in by 18 hours after tonight, right?
This is week
6
5.
hours for the field trip and then 3 hours times 4 classes.
And this is class number 5. So that would be 15 plus
21. And I put up
approximately 21.
Poll on the Facebook page, just asking how everything's going on. Calling you in if you need help.
Yeah, please reach out if you need help. Yeah. And then one other quick thing, I have a couple more copies of that Freshwater Fishes book, and I have a little backyard bird feeding guide. And so we're just gonna do some little door prizes if you guys want to participate. If you don't want it, just say no, thank you, and we'll call another number. So we have a random number generator, 1 through 29.
21.
21. Cecily Rogers. Okay. 23 is not here tonight. Barbara Williams. There you go. She's winning. No. And then another number. Bonnie Norman. I think what's left of those two freshwater fishes books, if you guys are interested in those. Okay. All right, thank you guys. We'll see y'all.
Do we need to stop things?